Alright, today we're going to go over page 6. It starts, it's number 1, then 2 to 22 even. It's part 1 of a 2-part assignment. Now, after part 1, we talked about the 3 steps. So you could use these 3 steps to graph everything in part 1, but really you only need this for number 22. And remember that first step is find A, B, and C. Then find the vertex using the vertex formula. So this is the vertex formula right here. And then you're going to make an XY chart with the vertex being in the middle. And then you plug it in, remember, using the rainbow effect. And that's how you do that. Part 1, use the parent function to compare. Remember, we put a dotted U on everything. So we use -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. And the parent function is just y equals x squared. So if I plug -2 in, I would get 4, then 1, then 0, 1, and 4. I'm going to use this same XY chart for every single one. It's just like I'm putting 2 problems on one just to compare. The graph of a quadratic function, it's called a parabola. Remember, that just means it's either a U or it could be an upside down U. So if you ever see something else on one of these problems, if you don't see a U or an upside down U, you messed up. Alright, so describe how to determine if a quadratic function has a max or a min. If it's a U, it's a max. Now remember, the shortcut is if your A is positive, that's how you know it's, I just totally messed up. That's supposed to say min, because it's got a bottom. So if your A is positive, you're happy, and it's got a bottom, so it's got a minimum. If your graph is an upside down U, that's when it has a maximum. And if you wanted to know just by looking at it without graphing it, if the number in front of the x squared is negative, then it's a frowny face. Alright, number 4 is y is equal to -3x squared. And they just gave you the x values. It's basically an XY chart on its side. That's just a table. So I'm going to plug in -2. So I say y equals -3 times -2 squared. If you just use your calculator, it'll give you all the work, but I do -2 squared. Remember, negative times a negative is a positive, so I get -3 times +4, so I get -12. Now I plug in -1. Y equals -3 times -1 squared. -1 squared is 1, times -3 is -3. I plug in 0. Y equals -3 times 0 squared. -3 times 0 is 0. Then I plug in -1, I get -3. And I plug in 2, I get -12. Notice, with rainbow, because 0 is our vertex. Alright, that's it for 4. Alright, number 6, same exact concept. I don't like making the left and right XY chart, I like making it up and down. So they have -6, -3, 0, 3, and 6. So I plug it in. Y equals -1/3. Instead of x, I put -6 squared. So I get -1/3 times 36, because a negative times a negative is a positive. So I get y equals -12. I don't have to plug in +6 if I don't want to. I will get -12 again. Y equals -3, -1/3. Instead of x, I put -3. It's squared. That's 9 times -1/3, which is -3. Rainbow effect tells me that 3 is also -3. Plug in 0. Y equals -1/3. Instead of x, I put 0. 0 squared is 0 times -1/3 is 0. That's it. That's your answer right there. That's it for 6. Alright, number 8. I have y equals 5x squared. So the first thing to do is I make an XY chart. I'm going to pick -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. I plug in -2 in for x, so I say y equals 5. Instead of x, I put -2. Square it. -2 squared is 4. 5 times 4 is 20. 20 is going to rainbow all the way over to 2, because I told you guys 0 was the vertex. You could use steps 1 and 2 from part 2, if you want. Now I'm going to plug in -1. Y equals 5. Instead of x, I put -1. It's squared. -1 squared is 1. 1 times 5 is 5. So I put 5 here. And that rainbows over. Now I plug in 0. 5 times 0 squared. 0 squared is 0. 5 times 0 is 0. I have my 5 points. I'm going to change my scale. I'm going to go by 3s. You can go by whatever you want, to be honest. Alright, so I go left 2 up to negative 20. That's just below 21 because I went by 3s. Negative 1, 5. Put a dot right there. 0, 0. And then 1, 5. And then 2, negative 20, or 2, 20. Remember, the line of symmetry, the axis of symmetry is the y-axis. And you can see that the dots are the same distance from that middle line. Now the last thing you had to do is you had to put the parent function on there. So the parent function is y equals x squared. I'm just going to use that to compare. Remember the xy chart from the earlier is negative 2, 4. The parent function x squared xy chart is negative 2, 4, negative 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, and 4. So I'm just going to put that in. It's not really there. It's just for comparison purposes. So I go right 1 up 1, right 2 up 4, left 1 up 1, left 2 up 4. It's just to compare, and I put a dotted line here because it's not really there. And now I just got to write a sentence to say, okay, the new graph is thinner. So the new graph y equals 5x squared is thinner than y equals x squared. That's the sentence. Alright, that's it for 8. So number 10, I have y equals negative x squared, so I just plug it in. XY chart, I pick negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, and 2. Plug it in. So I have y equals the opposite, and then inside the parentheses I have negative 2 squared. So you do negative 2 squared is positive 4, the opposite of that is negative 4. Now remember, I don't have to do the work for 2, I just put negative 4 right down there for 2. Now I do negative 1, y equals the opposite of negative 1 squared. Negative 1 squared is 1, the opposite of that is negative 1. So I put that for negative 1. I don't have to do 1. Remember, the rainbow effect tells me that 1 is also going to be negative 1. Plug in 0, y equals the opposite of 0 squared, which is just 0. So my graph is going to be 0, 0, I have a dot, left 1, down 1, right 1, down 1, left 2, down 4, right 2, down 4. Now, remember, you have to show me your parent function. So this is the same exact graph from the last problem. It's the same. This is the parent function. Alright? And it's the same XY chart. Negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, and 2. 4, 1, 0, 1, and 4. It's the same XY chart I did last time. Remember, this is a dotted line. So I have 0, 0. I have left 1 up 1, right 2 up 4, left 2 up 4. Remember, it's a dotted line because it's not part of the graph. It's just there to sketch. It's just there to compare. So then I write a sentence. I say, okay, the new graph, y equals negative x squared, is flipped. All right, that's it for 10. All right, 12. I'm going to make an XY chart. I just left the parent function on there because I didn't want to graph it already again. It's the same exact parent function. I'm going to pick my points, negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, and 2. And remember, in class, I actually added negative 4 and positive 4 because of this fraction. All right? Because when I plug it in, I'm going to plug in 0 first. I get y equal, and remember, guys, g of x is just a fancy way to say y. Y equals negative 1/4. Instead of x, I put 0 squared. So I get y equals 0. So that one's the same. That's the vertex. I plug in 1. If I plug in 1, I actually get negative 1/4. I get negative 1/4. Instead of x, I put 1 squared. 1 squared is 1. So I get y equals negative 1/4. I don't want to deal with negative 1/4, so I don't actually use it, even though I could rainbow it over, and I could use it if you really don't mind graphing the fractions. Now I'm going to graph 2. Y equals negative 1/4. Instead of x, I put 2 squared. 2 squared is 4. 4 times negative 1/4 is negative 1. Rainbow that over. Now, like I said, you could use these 5 points here, but I'm not going to use them because I don't want to deal with that fraction. So that's why I picked 4. The reason I picked 4 is because it has a multiple of 4 on there. I'm pretty sure it won't have a fraction. So y equals negative 1/4, 4 squared. 4 squared is 16 times negative 1/4 is negative 4. Alright, so I'm going to go 0, 0. That's the dot. I'm going to go, and I'm going to graph these 5. I'm going to graph this one, this one, this one. I'm not graphing 1 and negative 1. They're on the line, so if you want to graph them, you can. I'm going to go left 2, down 1, left 4, down 4. Same thing, right 2, down 1, right 4, down 4. Now, my new graph is flipped and wider. That's it. Alright, number 14, I have y equals 4x squared plus 1. I'm going to pick negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, and 2. I plug in 0, I get 0 squared. Alright, I'm going to get 1, because 4 times 0 squared is 0, plus 1 is 1. So I have 1 here. Remember, that's my vertex. Can't do nothing with that. Now I'm going to plug in 1. 4 times 1 squared plus 1. 1 squared is 1 times 4. So I get 5. Remember, 5 rainbows over to negative 1. See how I'm going to plug in both of them? And now I'm going to plug in I'm going to plug in 2. 4 times 2 squared plus 1. 2 squared is 4. 4 times 4 is 16. 16 plus 1 is 17. All the way over there, there's 17. I got my points. So I'm actually going to change my y's. I'm going to go by 2. So there's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. I'm going to go left 2 up to 17. It's kind of right here. I'm going to go right 2 up to 17. It's kind of right there. Left 1 up to 5. Right 1 up to 5. 0, 1. Alright, there's my line. It's a solid line. Now, remember, I'm going to graph my parent function. So the parent function is always the same. So the parent function is y equals x squared. Hopefully you know by now. So remember, the xy chart for the parent function is negative 2, 4, negative 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, and 4. So I'm going to go left 2, up to 4, put a dot. Left 1, up to 1, put a dot, 0, 0. Right 1, up 1. Right 2, up 4. And now this is a dotted line. It doesn't count. So what I see is I say the new graph is thinner, and it's actually up 1 point. It actually moved up 1 point. Okay? And that's it. Alright, so 16 is g of x equals negative 2x squared minus 5. Remember, guys, you can just replace g of x with y if you don't like that g of x there. So negative 2x squared minus 5. I'm making an xy chart. I'm going to put negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, and 2. I plug in 0 because that's the easiest, and that's also my vertex. So that's my vertex. Plug in 0, negative 2. Instead of x, I put 0 squared minus 5. So I get y equals negative 5. Alright, now I'm going to plug in 1. So I say y equals negative 2 times 1 squared minus 5. 1 squared is 1. Times negative 2 is negative 2 minus 5. So I get y equals negative 7. Now I'm going to plug in positive 2. So I say y equals negative 2 times 2 squared minus 5. 2 squared is 4. That gives me minus 8 minus 5, which is negative 13. Remember, I'm just going to change my scale. I'm going to go by 2, so it's negative 2, negative 4, negative 6, negative 8, negative 10, negative 12, negative 14. 0, negative 5 is a dot on my graph. Left 1 down to negative 7 is a dot on my graph. Right 1 down to negative 7 is a dot on my graph. Left 2 down to 13, and it's a dot on my graph. And right 2 down to 13, that's another dot on my graph. Remember, these y's are up by 2's. So now I have to put my parent function on there. So my parent function is y equals x squared. Hopefully you know that it's 0, 0, right 1 up 1, left 1 up 1, right 2 up 4, left 2 up 4. It's a dotted line. So what I'm going to say is the new graph, it's flipped. It is skinnier. It is down 5 units. So there's 3 things that changed on this graph. And that's it for 16. Alright, number 18. So I'm going to start making my XY chart. I am not going to use negative 2, negative 1. I'm going to use negative 10, negative 5, 0, and 5, and 10 because of that fraction right there. So I'm going to use multiples of 5 so I don't have to deal with a bunch of fractions. Alright? Now, I'm going to plug in 0 because 0 is the easiest. I'm going to say y equals negative 1/5. Instead of x, I put 0 squared minus 2. That cancels out, so it's just equal to negative 2. Now I'm going to plug in 5. You can plug in negative 5 if you like. I just like plugging in the positive number. So y equals negative 1/5 5 squared minus 2. 5 squared is 25. 25 times negative 1/5 is negative 5 minus 2, so I get negative 7. Remember, I don't have to plug in negative 5, it just rainbows over. So now, I'm going to plug in positive 10, negative 1/5. Instead of x, I put 10. It's squared minus 2. 10 squared is 100 times negative 1/5 is negative 20 minus 2. I got negative 22. So that's going to rainbow over negative 22. Alright? So now I'm going to make a graph. I'm going to go by 3's. So we're going to say that's negative 3, that's negative 6, negative 9, negative 12, negative 15, negative 18, negative 21. So that the top is positive, but same thing by 3's. Remember, if you change one part of the y-axis, you have to change all of it. But you don't have to change both axes. I can change just the y's and leave the x's alone. But in this case, I'm going to make the x's go, we'll say this is 5, and this is 10. So that means this is negative 5, and this is negative 10. So I'm going to go 0, negative 2. It's right here. We're going to go left 5 down to 7. We're going to go right 5 down to 7. We're going to go left 10 down to 22. We're going to go right 10 down to 22. Remember, this is a U. Alright, now once again, real quickly, I'm going to put the parent function on there. Parent function, I'm going to go left 1, which this is 2.5. This is like left 1. It's like right here. So that's like left 1 up 1 is kind of like right here. 0, 0, right 1 up 1. It's kind of like right there. And then right 2 up 4. Just quick sketch, guys. It doesn't have to be perfect because this is not part of my graph. So the new graph is flipped. It's wider, and it's down 2 units to start. And that's it for 18. All right, number 20 is using this problem. It says y equals 4x squared plus 24x minus 7. And they said that the y-intercept of the graph is 7. And that's not true. What we're going to find out is the y-intercept of the graph is not 7. It's something else. Here's how you find out the y-intercept. Really, you just do step 1. Step 1 says find a. Remember, a is always, then you find the x squared and you always look in front of it. It's that number. So a is 4. B, you always find the x and you look at the number in front of it. And C is always the number without a letter. So it's negative 7. And then we found out that whatever the C is, that's always the y-intercept. So the only mistake they made is it's not positive 7. It's just supposed to be negative 7. That's it. All right, so 22 says we're gonna use those 3 steps now. You're not going to use the parent function part because now that we have something in the middle, we have something going on in the middle, it's going to move your graph around, and you can't just use negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, and 2. So step 1 is to just find A, which is 3, B, which is negative 6, and C is 4. Step 2 says you're going to use this formula, x equals the opposite of b all over 2a. So I'm going to plug in negative 6 right there and 3 right there. So I'm going to get the opposite of negative 6 all over 2 times 3. Now remember, if you're going to use a calculator and try to plug this all in one time, you need an extra set of parentheses. Personally, I recommend that you do the top all by itself. The opposite of a negative is a positive. 2 times 3 is a positive. 6 over 6 is 1. This is the middle of your XY chart. So when I make my XY chart, I no longer have the same negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, and 2. I put 1 in the middle because that's my vertex. Then I'm going to write 2 above it and 3 above it. And what's smaller than 1? 0, and then negative 1. Now, I don't have to do any work to find 0. Like 0 is really easy because if you know what C is, you put 0 right there. And now look, because of the rainbow effect, I don't even have to plug in 2. I know that one's 4. Now you can either plug in 3 or negative 1. You can plug in 3 or negative 1. It doesn't matter. I'm going to plug in 3. So I say y equals 3. Instead of x, I put 3 squared minus 6 times 3 plus 4. 3 squared is 9. 9 times 3 is 27. 27 minus 18 plus 4 is positive 13. So 13 goes here, which means it rainbows all the way over here. Now the last one I have to plug in is 1. So I'm going to say y equals 3 times 1 squared minus 6 times 1 plus 4. 1 squared is 1 times 3 is 3 minus 6 plus 4, that equals positive 1. So I put a 1 right here. It's just coincidence that the 1, it's 1, 1. It's not always going to be 1, 1. It could be 1, 2. It could be 1, 11. It doesn't matter. But in this case, it is 1, 1. So I go right 1 up 1, 0, 4, right 2 up 4. I'm going to go 3, 13's way up here, and negative 1's way up there. And that's it. You're done. You don't have to do the parent function because we already know now that since a is positive, it should have been a u. We know about the y-intercept. We know that it's a little bit thinner than normal, all because of that. So that's it. That's it for 22.